I seem to break a bone once in a while, and I had a poem in Love Like a Conflagration about a broken bone, and it was called After the Fall. I lived in paradise is, on the surface, it's about another broken bone, and lessons that I did not learn after my first broken bone. So here is, I lived in paradise. I lived in paradise, and then I fell. Outside of paradise can seem like hell. The falling took no time, an idle thought, a heedless act, and then the instant swell of brass and timpani and angels grieving. Then just as swiftly only my own breath, distant, hesitant, and so deceiving, as if all were still well if I were breathing. Outside those gates, the salt has lost its salt. In my no longer innocent gestalt, I know that all this harm and sorrow happened through my fault, my most grievous fault.
So maybe we can keep going then with this fall theme. There's a poem that you wrote. Let me just find it. Surviving Consolation, which is in the second section of the book.
Okay. This poem has an epigraph from Saint Ignatius of Loyola, from the 10th rule on the discernment of spirits. And the epigraph is, "Let him who is in consolation think how he will conduct himself in the desolation which will come after, taking new strength for then." And this poem is called Surviving Consolation. 1. The Romans had it right, placing a slave, in the gilded chariot beside the hero at his triumph. Women waved and flowers flew, and a sea of strong men cried the hero's name like a god's name, and the drone of eloquent encomiums proceeded, while the crouching slave, for the hero's ears alone, murmured the other words the hero needed. Remember that you will die. In the grip of bliss, acclaim, and power, don't get too used to this. 2. Believe me, I've been thinking, this can't last. These good things raining down, layer on layer, the pleasure and the praise, too much, too fast, too breathtaking to let out any prayer except, I praise you, Lord. I bless your name for this euphoric rush. I glorify, adore, and thank you. My blue flame burns like a votive candle gone awry. 3. I crave the gift more than I crave the giver, and I am immoderate. On tasting glory, I want more, and I want it over and over. Mine is a mythic and a much-told story. We know what happens next in all such cases, a falling down, or, seen in a different way, a rescue, by a God whose wild embraces may be withdrawn if they lead us astray. 4. I sow the seeds of my falling down, fingering like a silver charm the thought that I deserve renown. Thus do I pinch grace into harm. 5. My God will rescue me. Before the fact of what is coming, my overwhelming thought is to talk myself down gently. Brace for impact. This is going to hurt. This is going to hurt a lot.
Okay, thanks for reading that. Well, I can't not ask about the autobiographical aspects of these poems, which you already referred to. Now you had this, seems to be a reference to the great success you had with your previous collection, and the fact that you took a pretty bad fall and were spending months recovering from that in the interim between that book and this one. So how do you relate then, if I may ask, the spiritual theme to the actual literal fall that you took?
Well, this was written before my most recent fall. So,
oh, really? Okay.
But it is about love like a conflagration, because I did have my 15 minutes of fame with that book.
Mm-hmm.
And I caused a little bit of action on Twitter. And even saying that now, it sounds ridiculous. But
cringy, as they say.
Yes, but yeah, very cringy. But those things did happen, and I wasn't comfortable with it, but I knew I could get comfortable with it, and I didn't really want to, and I knew I liked it, but I didn't like it, and so I knew it couldn't last. A lot of my poems are about things that just can't last or don't last. So yeah, this is connected to that first book.
Okay. So yeah, it was before the fall. That's interesting, because I was reading this thinking it was written after your most recent injury,
No.
and thinking, trying to figure out, well, how could she have anticipated that, so to speak, but it sounds like it's an experience that you've had more than once, so that, the analogy sort of is still a concrete one.
Well, sure, I've had more than one fall, but I've had more than one comeuppance too. So, which is kind of what this poem is about. Yeah.
So, like, how did you combat those temptations after your first book?
Well, they went away. They stopped. I had my 15 minutes, and then life went back to normal. And that was very good.
So that is part of what you're warning yourself about.
Yes.
In the poem.
Yes. Not violence or injury, but just this can't last.
I see. So it was less of a cataclysmic fall than might be thought.
It was a gentle fall.
Yeah. But maybe more so because you warned yourself and prepared yourself for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that the Romans did that was brilliant. That the Romans used to do that. Just so wise. Even though those men were practically made gods when they won a war, still they had the little voice in their ear saying, Don't get used to this. You're going to die someday.